Hi, this is the first part of my short story, Son of Gord. I wrote this during lockdown in 2020, 2021. I've been sat on it for a while, to be honest. I didn't really know what to do with it. Can't really afford to self-publish it at the moment. I would like to put it, and it is a short story. I would like to put it together with a collection of short stories and maybe publish it myself, something to think about for the future. I think this story would work really well if it was animated. So I can't really afford to pay someone a lot of money to animate it, but I don't know, obviously it's a very lengthy time-consuming process. If there are any amateur animators out there that want to showcase their skills, and I think this story would work really, really well if it was animated. I just want to say as well off the bat, there is no offence intended with this story. It's just a comical retelling of a very old story. This is Son of Gord Part 1. I will be releasing this over the next few weeks in parts, and you'll get to listen to the whole story over the next few weeks, and probably be in 4 or 5 parts, 4 or 5 minutes per part. If, however, you would like to support me in my efforts on this channel to bring content to you, I do have a Patreon, and as a reward for supporting me on the Patreon, there is a full version of this story already up on my Patreon. So if you would like to watch it now and you can't wait, then it is available. But obviously it's £3 a month subscription. I don't expect anyone to join it, but if you want to support me, I won't say no. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the story. This is Son of Gord, Part 1. Gordon pulled back the lever. The PPH 7000 zigzagged, spluttered, and grunted awkwardly out of hyperspace. He glanced at the gauges, swore, and put his head in his hands. The hopper's fuel had all but evaporated in one manoeuvre. He'd had no choice but to react quickly, so had plotted no specific course as he jerked the hopper violently into zip speed. He had come perilously close to being captured by Nubian pirates. Without question, they would have stripped his brother's beloved hopper and sold the parts to unscrupulous Olympian junk traders. Furthermore, had they discovered who he was, he would have been imprisoned and held to ransom, a ransom which his father, Lord Stardust, would have begrudgingly paid, but Gordon would never have heard the bloody end of it. The fact is, Gordon was a bit of a troublemaker and an all-round disappointment, a fact he was consistently reminded of by his illustrious family. His older brother Marvin was a bit of a big deal. He was the captain on Wakan Tanker's ship, had been top of all his classes at school, was an excellent athlete and an all-round boorish big head. Gordon, on the other hand, had failed miserably at school and had not fared much better as a young adult, lurching from one scandal to the next and rarely staying out of trashy newspapers like The Spin. His most recent escapades had led to his current predicament. He had been photographed in a compromising situation, flanked by a couple of Elastian prostitutes and surrounded by several empty bottles of moonshine. Earlier that same evening, an irate casino owner had taken a swing at him, leaving him with a prominent black eye. Before the papers had been printed the next morning, he had crept sheepishly out of the house, taking his brother's purple Planet Hopper 7000. Gordon was not without skill as a pilot. In fact, he had shown quite a bit of promise. But alas, he was reckless, drank too much, and often forgot little details like checking if all the hatches were down and making sure he had enough fuel to complete his journey. So here he sat, hovering like a zumblebee in the middle of bloody nowhere. Hardly any fuel, and the dawning realisation that if he was ever to get back home, he would have to call his flippin' mother. Following these musings, Gordon raised his head and glanced at the star-nav. Discovering he was in uncharted space, he turned his head left and right, surveying the blanket of blackness that seemed to echo his hopeless situation. Slowly he rotated the hopper clockwise, taking in the whole of his surroundings. As he turned, he observed flickering in the distance what appeared to be a particularly bright star. It was a long shot, but after some minutes of befuddlement, he clicked the hopper into gear and gingerly guided it towards the distant star. As Gordon slowly trundled along, trying to conserve the little fuel he had, for the first time in quite a while his thoughts settled on his middle brother. Following a loud shriek, a violent explosion, and what sounded like the clattering of a gazillion pots and pans, his brother Ziggy had disappeared without a trace. Ziggy had spent several months locked in the basement of their parents' house. He claimed to have been inventing some kind of interdimensional time machine. No one believed him. Everyone thought he was weird. That was over 3 years ago, and he was not really spoken of anymore. As he got closer, Gordon began to wonder if the star might actually be a sun. If it were, then there would almost certainly be planets nearby. He flicked the hopper into lazy mode, stood up and switched on the Olmec droid. Olmi whistled, his limbs jerked into life, and he sat bolt upright, staring at Gordon with an inquisitive look on his face. Gordon raised his eyebrows, tried to establish an air of authority, and said, "Before you say anything, it's not my fault that pirates..." Olmi interjected in his typical condescending, effeminate metallic tone. "What have you managed to get us into this time?" Much like the hopper's fuel following the jump into hyperspace, Gordon's attempts at assertiveness evaporated. "The Anubian pirates, they were going to steal the ship," he spluttered. "Where are we?" Olmi intoned. "I don't know," Gordon conceded glumly. "I see we are almost out of fuel," Olmi said derisively. "Can you scan for signs of life nearby?" Gordon inquired tentatively. "Why would you want to determine if there was any life nearby? Why don't you just call your mother and get her to come and extricate you from this absurd situation?" Adding with a sneer, "It wouldn't be the first time." Regaining his composure, Gordon asserted, "Look, I'm not going to call Mother until it's absolutely necessary. And besides, now we're here, we may as well have a look around and see if we can find some fuel." Olmi looked at him with an air of contempt. "Just do as I ask, otherwise I'll switch you back into hibernation mode. I'm calling the shots here," Gordon added, beginning to lose his patience. Olmi sighed and pressed 2 small buttons on the side of his temples and stated in a more automated tone, "There is a cluster of 8 planets around a large sun. The third closest has multiple signs of life. Uploading coordinates." Just enough fuel to get there. Gordon and Olmi didn't really talk much as they approached the unknown planet. Olmi was prone to sulkiness, and Gordon did not really have much else to say to him anyway.